Олі, плюси я опоздала, тому що Катя, нормально
Oh, assalamu alaikum everyone. First of all, thank you for coming and making it today to N5. This is one of our events, which is Masterclass. And we have, first of all, we would like to thank our graduates, ELIE and Eddie, for coming and making it. And, you know, I think we are really proud of them being part of N5. They're actually founding members. We were just discussing. They're founding members because they were here at the first. And we have a lot of startups coming through. And we're really proud because we passed the 500 mark of startups today. So it makes us one of the regional biggest incubators. So, and also our startups have raised investment, 3 billion in investment. And we continue to see every year more startups coming in. And I think ANGHAMI is one example. Of course, we have ANGHAMI, we have Tabi, but today we have ANGHAMI to give us some of the experience, share some of the experiences, the success stories, the hard, turns as well. And we're here to listen to them. So I leave it to them today to speak about their experience and enjoy the night and enjoy the suhoor. Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, good evening. I'm Sheth, founder of Rightfully, one of the N5 tech startups. I've put together a bunch of notes for the interview today, but I realize we're at a risk that this might go missing or just not work. And it's because it's connected to the M5 Wi-Fi here. But anyway, that's a separate conversation. So I'm really excited to have ELIE with us. And you know, for all of us M5 community startups, ELIE's going to help us to take over the world. So very low expectations. Thank you so much, ELIE.
Hi everyone. I mean, first, thanks Saeed for the intro and thanks for having us. I mean, yeah, as you said, we're part of the founding members of M5. It didn't look like that, but and you know, I'm proud to be part of the 500 cohort. I mean, congratulations for that number. That is big. 500 is not easy. I mean, honestly, we'll take a clap for that. 500 startups. And I guess we even if you drop the Wi-Fi and stuff, we'll make up questions.
Yeah,
it's
of
fine,
course,
right?
of course. So please take a seat. I'm sure everyone knows ELIE, but let me just do a very quick introduction. So, ELIE HABIB is a serial tech entrepreneur. He has co-founded several companies, and in 2012, he co-founded ANGHAMI. From then on, ANGHAMI has grown to become the Middle East's largest music streaming platform. And in February 2022, ANGHAMI became the first tech startup in the Middle East to be listed on the NASDAQ stock exchange. With 120 million registered users, a substantial subscriber base, and a catalogue of more than 100 million songs, ANGHAMI is the go-to platform for Arabic and international music, podcasts and entertainment. ELIE, good to have you here.
Thank you. And we probably should add up that one is my co-founder that I founded is over there on the table. He can, yeah, that's Eddie. That's my co-founder. And also another thing to note about ANGHAMI, about us, is in November we went into a deal to merge with OSN Plus to take over the OSN Plus entity in ANGHAMI, and we're hopefully completing the merger in a few weeks, which makes us not just music but video and series, in just over a few weeks, all under one umbrella, and we're very proud of this.
Wow. Okay, so let's get into the interview. We're gonna go on for about 40-45 minutes, and then there'll be some audience questions. So I know there's a number of people came up to me before the interview. They said, "Are you asking ELIE some really clever questions and difficult questions?" I said, "No, I'm actually being quite easy. But if you want to," so I know there's a few people, Kareem, Rekha over there, have some good questions too. But anyway, let's start here. So, Middle East's largest streaming platform, listed on NASDAQ, close to 2 million paying users, 50 million plus in revenue. What car do you drive?
That's the tough question, or the easy one? It's a Neutron, it's an electrical car.
Okay, fine. So, all right, on a serious note, can you briefly share the journey of building ANGHAMI, and what was the inner belief that kept you going even when people were saying no?
First, it's very interesting to understand that, you know, when you start building something, you have a bunch of reasons, but those reasons you don't hold them very close to your heart at the beginning. It kind of starts shifting, right? I mean, we start doing something today for a reason, but then eventually with new data and with new things that happen across, you elaborate, you evolve, right? I mean, you don't get stuck into whatever you started. When I started personally making ANGHAMI, it was for me, it's like, I want to do a mobile app. I mean, that was it for me. For Eddie, he loves music. He wanted to create something around music. He wanted to be able to listen to any music he wanted. For me, it's like, can I actually make that dream come true? Because for me, it's like, how do I do this? And at the time, everybody told us you should launch web. At the time, I'm going back 2012, everybody said that you should launch web, everything is a website. And for me, it's like, no, that's not interesting, because, you know, I've done website before. I wanted mobile for, you know, my one personal selfish reason, but two, it's like we figured out we can make money out of it. It could generate a revenue stream, right? We didn't know how much, we didn't know how hard it's going to be. And, you know, like most of you would guess, you know, it's very hard. It was way harder than what we expected. But for us, the mission after the first year was like, okay, we validated that, okay, we were able to do a mobile app. The demand is there, because we expected first year to get around 300,000 users, 300,000 users. We reached 1 million after 3 months. So when we got to those two facts, at one, we launched, we were able to do the basic MVP. Is not an MVP as in usable, but MVP that people love, right? People want it. So once we established those facts, for me it was like, okay, how big can that be? Can we actually reach more users? And then, so our idea became bigger, but then it became, can we get people to actually pay more than what we thought would be? Because we expected a smaller number at the beginning. Why? Because at the time, piracy was all over the place. Streaming music was inexistent, right? I mean, Apple, you know, iTunes didn't exist in the Middle East. You could not buy anything. So for anyone, you know, buying anything on digital music was kind of, you know, non-starter. Why would anyone pay money for it? But then when, again, we established that people wanted to pay for music, and bit by bit, that, I'm taking you through how I think, because that's generally what any startup adapt to. I don't want to talk about things that, you know, are very relevant to us, but rather how we evolve to become who we are right now. And that actually probably adapt to everybody. Everybody is in a position that they think about something and then start experimenting. Some experiments fail, generally 8 out of 10 fail, and the good ones that succeed you have to double down on. So for us, we realized that we have a niche that is important in music. It's like a lot of what we had to grow with made sense only if we have a payment platform, which is kind of obvious. But we had no payment platform at the time because people weren't ready to pay by their credit card. So we realized we had to create a payment platform, which is a telco. We realized that, you know, we had to convince the artists that would create value if they work with us. So every time, you know, we were validating one thing, and then we were thinking bigger, and we were thinking bigger. Eventually, we got to think that, oh, what if we actually list in the NASDAQ? And because that was supposed to create more capital for us. That's why we listed. We didn't list because we wanted to list. We listed because we wanted to create capital. Obviously, we listed at one of the worst times in history.
Before we do the NASDAQ journey, before we do the NASDAQ story, I just want to just go slightly to the beginning, where you talked about MVP, and MVP wasn't all about 1 million users, it was about who's paying. So for a startup, trying to get its first 100 customers is like a dream come true, right? Or your first 1,000. Tell me about that.
So I wouldn't forget that date. It was, I think, 16 March 2013. We had just launched payment and realized that our first customers were paid by a telco. So we had made a deal to launch first with a telco that would actually pay on behalf of the users. That was a really validation that we can generate revenue. That by itself was something big. The first user that used our platform was paid by a telco. That said at the beginning, because we understood that if we actually start doing something that maybe nobody will pay for, that would be worthless, right? I mean, why would we spend time on it? So we had to validate, and we validated with the B2B, which was a telco in Jordan, Orange, that was willing to pay for its user to launch the first streaming platform in the Middle East and stuff like that. That made sense. But then 3 months later or 4 months later, we wanted to start validating whether users would pay. We started it, and at the time, based from our previous experience in a previous company that I founded, I had built a platform around SMS. So I hooked it up to my own platform to be able to receive an SMS on any time a user would pay. Why? Because we didn't expect a big number, right? And it was okay. I mean, some SMSs were received during the day. We started getting some users paying, and I was happy. So I took my wife out at night to movies. I don't remember the movie, but I remember what happened during the movie. And then the SMS started to flow. I was looking at my phone, and it couldn't keep up on the SMS. It's like, oh my God. I was so happy. It's like, okay, we made it. I don't have to worry about anything. The next day, I go to work. I think we had around 300 SMS, which was way more than what I thought I would get the first day. And I started looking at them and validating them. I was I'm an engineer, that's my background, so I could actually validate. And then I realized that not all, but probably 80% of those have one common thing, which is, if memory serves, Zepto something. Zepto something turned out to be a in-app purchase on the App Store that was hacked via a mechanism. At the time, you can look it up on some website, you'll find it. So basically, someone was using an app to tell our app that the user paid, and we actually were falling for it. So roughly 80% of the people who paid were just hackers. It was really a bad thing, but it was an amazing thing. Why? Because we understood that people wanted our platform so bad that they're willing to hack it to actually become a paying subscriber to get the perks. 20% were willing to pay, but 80% were willing to hack. So the need was there. So we just looked at the positive aspect of it. The need was there. Probably pricing wasn't, there. I mean, probably it was too expensive for those people that they're willing to hack, but there was something. So yeah, I was disappointed when that happened, but we tried to look at what can we learn from it. We learned that people were willing to pay, but really not as much as what we expected. So that actually triggered a whole different way of trying to think through things. Again, I'm trying to elaborate on what we thought, because this is actually how we actually look at the problem, trying to figure out whether it's good, it's bad, what can we do for it, and figure out the opportunity. Even in that opportunity, figure out there was, in that problem, there was an opportunity.
Teach us about, okay, so you've had this situation where you're watching a movie. You remember what movie it was?
I told you, I don't remember. I was in a movie, but I remember my wife was next to me, and I was very happy. But I probably didn't look at the movie. I was looking at the SMS that day.
Okay, so let's just pretend you're watching Home Alone. My kids are watching Home Alone every day at the moment. So you're watching Home Alone and you get 300 text messages. Luckily you didn't spend all your money. But that was your first 100 customers that was your big learning point. What changed between 100 to 1,000? What did you do differently?
Yeah, that's a great question. See, at the beginning, we expected our consumer to be someone, but then we realized that our consumer was someone else, right? When based on the first people that paid us, it was like, okay, let us understand build the persona not on what we thought would be using our platform, but on actually who were those people, and literally calling those people. And trust me, when you call customers, you're humbled. You're humbled because you're calling someone who just paid for you, and you're just trying to understand why they paid and whether they're happy and everything, and they'll tell you everything that they don't like. I mean, they won't tell you what they like, but they tell you everything that they don't like, and you start understanding certain things. at that time, I know it sounds odd right now, but at that time, the first thing that I understood is a lot of those 20% that paid misunderstood the whole concept. Why? Because I thought they were paying for the service forever. That at the time, again, go back to 2012, 2013, people didn't pay for subscriptions. Nobody paid for any subscription. The whole idea that they were actually paying circa 18 dirhams, but then 30 days from now they will pay another 18 dirhams was crazy for them. They wanted to sue us. I mean, you're going to take money again and again and again. So it was actually trying to understand their motives. People cared about music. They wanted to, certain people wanted to have music because they wanted to have the catalog of their own art, the artists that I love with them, and be able to listen to them on the way to school. I mean, we did not expect at the time we didn't have younger audience buying, because we expected those people wouldn't have money to pay on their own. But then later, I didn't have kids at the time, realized that they're actually using their father's phone, their whatever, and we literally started understanding who is our audience. We realized, for instance, that we have users that couldn't find music that they're searching for, and were confused, and they tell me like, we're searching for Justin Bieber. I mean, we know we have Justin Bieber, and I search for Justin Bieber, I find him, but they search and they don't find him, and we realize that they're actually typing Justin Bieber in Arabic. At the time, for us, it's like, if you're searching for Arabic music, you might type in Arabic, but if you're searching for international music in Saudi, it's still type in English, right? I mean, it turned out, no, they were typing Arabic. So a lot of those, just be on top of your customer and trying to understand what he uses and how he types. We realized that, I had to go spend days, I remember, simply with customers, and one good thing was going to university. Because you can just find a lot of your audience sitting over there, and you just I gave them the product and download and use, and I was just watching them, how they behave in the app and what they're typing. I know we had analytics and stuff, and we could look on from the server side, but it wasn't like looking at the user and figuring out that he's not finding his way in, right? It's like we had certain expectations of behavior because we had studied different apps, have different behavior. But for many of the people, they have not used the music streaming service before, so their expectations were very different. But once we actually understood how they're using and understood what made sense for them, and in terms of priorities, so everybody wants everything, but there is a priority, and you just need to figure out what 20% will actually cover 80% of your users rather than vice versa. And we became way better. And I personally was an engineer, so I didn't exactly understand human psychology, but watching users and interacting with them, we definitely realized that if we don't follow with the user, if we don't talk to him constantly, we're going to fall way behind.
Interesting, really interesting. Actually, Olga from Global, somewhere here, there she is. So as we were just standing over there, she came across and said, Neil, I've launched this new thing. And she said, here, check it out. And then she said, actually, can I just record how you use my phone? And she hit record. And that was just a really easy example. And we already caught a few issues. So that's, I guess, low tech, very quick way of doing what you just described there. And she did that 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, I guess talking to your user is going to be always the best thing ever. And in our case, our users were multiple people. I mean, for me, from the inception, it was, we have our customers, right? And then we have the brands, we have the artists, we have the labels we deal with. And for me, one very important quote-unquote user that I need to take care of were our team, right? Because our team served multiple purposes. They were building the product, they need to understand it, they need to understand the why are here. And I used to tell my team, I still tell them, we're doing an MBA all together, right? We're learning. As long as we share information, we're gonna do an MBA all together, we're gonna all learn, and instead of just me and Eddie thinking our own thing, everybody's gonna think and be able to contribute. And we're using a product, we we have a product that we're using. We're not selling diapers that we're not using. We're using a product, so we're able to understand it and iterate quickly, and that is pretty much what we still do in that perspective. Our team is the backbone, and without that we couldn't do anything. And clap for them. There's a table over there that filled from our team. Many of them have been with us for 7-8 years.
Fascinating. So let's talk about raising investment. It can be
Not
stressful.
fun, not fun.
Well, let's see. So it can be stressful, challenging for many startups. It can be an ongoing conversation. How did you know you were ready to raise? Number one, and why did you go down the SPAC NASDAQ route over VC?
Okay, so that's a very, okay, I'll try to be quick. One, we didn't know about VCs at the time, so we didn't know that we were ready to raise. That's probably irrelevant for most of you, but at the time, because of different companies that we've created before, the whole idea of raising money from someone we don't know was never something that crossed my mind. So originally, me and Eddie put in roughly 200K from us to launch ANGHAMI. Then we took a loan from a bank. Yeah, you could still take a loan.
Dollars? Dirhams?
Dollars. We put $200K, and then we took a loan for 400K, if memory serves right. Yeah, we took a loan for 400K that we had to return over 7 years. That was a pretty good loan. But then we realized that if we didn't have to deal with music labels, probably that would have been enough for us to launch and a few years down the road. But when we had to sign all the big labels, say Universal, Warner, Sony, Rotana, all of that, we had to put in money on the table. So we realized that we couldn't, we built our product without any external funding, but then we needed the money for the labels. But what we did at the time, because we couldn't understand how we were going to raise, we had those contracts with the telcos that I spoke about, and contracts with the labels, and we went to the VC and tell them, see, we have people willing to pay for us, we have people willing to give us the music, this is our product, would there be a way to get money? And that at the beginning, because we were very naive, we didn't know what to expect. But that later on we did multiple rounds, right? So we didn't directly go from first round to SPAC, thankfully. It became clear for us that we needed to figure out getting money. Money is fungible. $1 from VC1 is equal to $1 from VC2. But on the other hand, the VC, the requirement that the VC would put to the table was like a big difference. And having a VC that would stand by you versus a VC who's opportunistic to get on a lower valuation was something that took us a while to understand. And I still see a lot of startups trying to raise money simply because VCX gives them a higher valuation, hence it's better for them. And I think a lot will realize later down the road that they did a mistake. Because at the end of the day, when you raise money, you're quote-unquote taking a loan, right? It's not exactly a loan, but you're committing for that, right? And there are, preferred shares and all of that, that eventually if you don't do well on that big number that you created, it's going to be terrible for you later down the road. So we did multiple rounds, and we tried to make sure that we focus on VCs that are with us and that contributed to us, so preferring people who we know versus new ones. Now later, because of the question you asked, we got to a point whereby we wanted to provide liquidity to our investors. Because we do not have the preferred shares as founders and team and everything. We have a different class. The preferred one is the VCs, and we wanted to provide liquidity for them. So the idea of listing publicly was for two things. One, let's provide liquidity to our investors. Anybody want to exit, once we're public, they can exit if they want. Two, we'll have more capital, so we can actually, because we're listing in the US at the time, that the whole thing about listing in the Middle East for startups was not there at the time. Because when we started planning it, it was 2019. UAE or Saudi weren't that friendly for IPOs for startups. And
when we listed, the whole idea of listing in the US will allow us to give us capital market, deep capital market at the US, and the whole thinking about SPAC was at the time validated. We thought it was validated because there was a lot of VCs, a lot of startups that raised via SPAC, and it sounded achievable within a relatively, 9 months amount of time to do that. The idea of VC was possible. It would give us money, but it wouldn't give us a deep stock market that allows to do more and more of it, and neither would allow our investors to, have liquidity. That's why we decided to go through the SPAC route.
Last week, you reposted a post on LinkedIn about mental resilience. So, I'm guessing your resilience at the time of going through the SPAC and then what happened post-SPAC went through a roller coaster. As with many in5 startups, one day it's great, the next day it's miserable. Talk to us about mental resilience and what you learn with your own journey.
I guess, you become better with time. Hopefully you want to become better with time. So I know that for a fact that who I was 10 years ago is very different who I am today, but I matured with time, and I matured through the problems. It's not about how many mistakes you make or how many failures you do, it's whether how many times you stand up after those mistakes. So the whole idea of resilience is something that becomes part of you, right? And I expect problems. So it's not like I wake up and I go to work and saying that it's going to be a lovely day, everything. I expect problems. As a startup founder, I have, maybe a few things that I need to do well. One is challenge my team, get them to do better, right? Two, expect problems and solve them. The rest is kind of going to flow, right? The rest is kind of, but for me, it's like the whole idea is like I meet a lot of people, and I obviously we have a big team that we deal with. And the idea of being resilient and understanding what I just said, understanding that we plan for problems. My job is to be paranoid. My job is to actually figure out that something's going to go wrong. What am I planning towards that thing? And throughout our history, me and Eddie, we have had so many failures, so many problems, so many mistakes, so many unexpected things, and you get better at it, but that doesn't mean you feel good at it, right? I mean, you always have to realize you have to be very tough, and you have somehow to be able to raise, your team into the same concept. If you tell them everything is great, amazing, la la land, then they'll have the wrong expectations, and we all fail together. If we actually share some of our problems, you can't actually share all of your problems. For the founders over here, you probably realize that you get to a point whereby I can share most of my problems with my co-founder, that's it. But we do share a lot of the problems with everyone so that we're all ready for it. But in our career, in ANGHAMI journey, and I totally realized, when we used to see a graph like the valley of failure, or whatever, I forgot what they call them, you have a mistake, you have a problem, and you fail, and the next day you're up in the mountain and you see everything is great, and then there's a different thing. You get used to it. You get used to all of that, because at the end of the day, it's about iteration. I figured out that directionally, I progressed. I'm not where I want to, but I progressed. I'm way better off. And when I look at our journey, and from inception to everything that we've done, to the last thing about OSN Plus, I realized that directionally we're progressing the way that makes sense, the best way that we could take the company forward, and we're very proud where we are. Are we exactly, did we draw all of that? Did we expect everything that happened? Or no, most of that we didn't expect it. But we actually tried to take every circumstance and make it to the best of our ability. And obviously, because of having a good team that was trained, a good team that we helped raise in a lot of the cases. Most of our team started with us right from university.
just from uni, internship, part-time, a few years work, and they become better and they become the best version that you could shape within the company, and eventually they fly. And within the company or outside the company, we're happy for them either way.
Love that. Are both you and Eddie half class full people or half class empty?
Depending on the day, some days I'm the full, he's the empty, and sometimes it's the inverse. We prefer not to be too empty, right? Too full would be worse. Would be good, but not too empty.
Love that. Okay, so if you were an in-5 startup, let's take Kareem and Mustafa. So you're an in-5 startup. Your name is Kareem or Mustafa, and you're traveling around the world like Mustafa, 7 countries, like or continents, 7 countries in. Let's make it more dramatic. 7 countries in 7 days. He's been doing a conference at each country. Kareem, he's building his business from scratch, having many conversations. It's a roller coaster. These guys are walking up the Burj Khalifa on the stairs. If you were them and you're looking to raise, what would you do differently today?
I mean, to be fully clear, besides them, walking on the Burj Khalifa and traveling, I didn't exactly figure out everything. The mental toughness of being able to walk on the Burj Khalifa, walking up the stairs on Burj Khalifa is actually pretty good.
I've heard you're into fitness, actually.
Yeah, I'm recently trying to realize that if I'm into fitness, my brain thinks much better. I mean, if I work out daily, my brain thinks much better and I'm much more productive. So I guess that works pretty well for them.
Yeah.
But the whole idea, raising money is a lot of storytelling. It has nothing to do with the product. It has a lot to do with the people, with the team, and with the story that the team comes up with. It has to do, obviously, with who are the founders and everything, and probably the idea that they're working on right now must make sense. But generally speaking, it's very hard to come up with something and a few years down the road be working on exactly the same thing. That sometimes works, right? But generally speaking, you pivot, you elaborate, you iterate on the idea, and as long as they're focused and be able to have a good story to the right audience, to the right VC, to the right whomever, right? Because at the end of the day, we don't need to raise money from a VC at the beginning. I mean, raising from friends, family, angels might be better idea than raising directly from a VC. I see a lot of people immediately having an idea and going from an idea phase to a VC, which somehow probably going to be disappointed down the road. But I think if they're traveling that many countries and climbing that many stairs, hopefully they're smarter than me.
So, Ellie, in a recent interview, you said you were interested in entrepreneurs who dedicate their lives to the company and build a legacy. You used the word building a sustainable company rather than a high-growth company for an exit. Can you describe why you'll choose sustainable growth over fast-growth VC?
Because we've done the inverse. Because we've been through the high growth, whatever. So a lot of the times, VCs or people on board members will drive your agenda. I mean, clearly, at one point in time, we didn't know that we should say no, right? I mean, we should explain why this doesn't make sense for us. Because at the end of the day, when you're raising capital and you're growing and people tell you take more capital, you think you're doing fine, right? At the end of the day, gravity is there. I mean, gravity is something we cannot escape, right? We might, try to fake it, but gravity is there. At the end of the day, a sustainable company is a company that makes more than it spends. And if you are able to put a path of how you'll actually be able to create more value than what you're spending, then be it. It's fine if you go through a few years without meeting that particular deadline, but if you're going directionally toward what you want. The problem, to be able to do that, you have to understand finance. You have to understand what goes in and how it goes in. And I made, for instance, the cardinal mistake for multiple years not to fully understand my income statement and my P&L, right? And I thought it was going better, right? But when I actually figured out what I should track, and I looked at, okay, this is not going the way expected, but we can, tweak certain things to go the way expected, then it started make sense for me. So I actually figured that I call the company that is, on the path to sustainability, if it's actually tracking towards a number whereby it's going to feel that it's making more than it's consuming, right? And because we made all of the other mistakes of actually working on the top line without figuring out whether we are on a sustainability, profitability, whatever. Use the nice word. I preferred sustainability because it makes sense. We're sustaining growth, we're sustaining ourselves, and we're sustaining growth. So you can go many years and figuring out that you don't need to become sustainable, profitable. I think Uber's first quarter being profitable was just right now. So it happens, but because Uber was able to do it, you shouldn't do it. I mean, Uber is an exception, right? I think they raised $40-50 billion before becoming profitable, maybe more. That probably you're not going to have that. And we cannot build something just on an exception of a few companies that go throughout. So for me, it's like once I realized all of this, and it took a while to realize, I figured that if we can actually track towards sustainability by actually having the clear number of where are we far from that number, and figuring it on a month-on-month basis, and doing all the actions for us to actually keep growing, but again remaining sustainable, it would be the right business. And we're guilty of having many years whereby we didn't have that number straightforward in front of us.
Right, and just so we can learn from that, so what key numbers are you looking at?
Honestly, it's like some people will tell you EBITDA, and I don't know whether everybody's good with finance over here, but that number doesn't make sense much. At the end of the day, it's cash flow. Your cash drives your business. It's not your EBITDA. EBITDA is good at the end of the day. You could actually use it as certain proxy, but your cash flow is what drives the business, right? How much cash do you still have, and how much you're generating in cash, net cash, is what you want to be healthy. This is how you measure a healthy business. As an engineer, I was much deeper into understanding how we build the new product or the new tech or the new growth loop, then figuring out whether we're actually tracking towards a better cash flow.
Growth loops. So I love the transparency of the numbers behind the business as well. Recently you said you're running out 400k loss per month, but you're planning to be profitable this year. So what levers of influence and KPIs are you focusing on to make that shift?
That one is very complicated, and I think I said it before the OSM plus D. But one particular thing we went through in the past couple of years, and I've been transparent about it, so I don't mind being transparent. I think it's healthy if we all transparent, we can learn from each other. It's like we thought we needed to have more, part of the growth is to have more people, right? So you see is like, hiring 20 new engineers, hiring 20 new people, whatever, 50, whatever. As long as the company grows, the company should actually be adding more people. But then what we figured out is the more we're adding people, the task that used to take a week, suddenly, we add more people, suddenly it takes 4 weeks. It's like miracle. It's a miracle. You have more people focusing on a problem, and it actually inversely takes more time. Why? Because everybody has to pitch in his thought process. No, we don't do it this way, we do it this way, we do it this way, whatever, and we have to go through a certain process or whatever. So you create all of those processes that you think you're becoming a big company, but at the end of the day, you're becoming a fat company. So we realized that the first thing is to go back to the basics. If we're doing something what matters to our business, and how can we actually do more with less? And when you actually start focusing on what are you spending, and literally at one point, certain people know that it's a true story. I picked the credit card bill and all of our bills, and I read them line by line for the entire month. I tried to understand. I wanted to understand every expense we paid for, what was it for,
and on how I can file it on which particular project or team, and trying to figure out whether this all makes sense. And generally speaking, you should do that at the beginning because you don't have a lot of expenses. And every time you start doing it, you know, I mean, whatever, on monthly basis or quarterly basis, you should understand what makes sense. But
You did that recently?
not recently, not that recently, but I did it you know, a few years ago. But what I do right now, and something that, you know, your credit cards, your corporate credit card expire every 2 years.
Yeah.
So anytime my credit card expires, I discover, you know, we realize that, you know, certain things, you know, I don't renew, I forget to renew the credit card on, and nobody complains, right? It's like you figure out that you're spending for certain services, but nobody's using them, right? And at the end of the day, you get to a point whereby you think that you should actually use your Google, but your Notion and your Miro and your whatever, Asana and all of it, and you end up having a ton of services that you're supposedly using. Why? Because you've read about them in TechCrunch or whatever, and you're supposed to be like that other company uses all of those complicated services. At the end of the day, a lot of that don't make sense, right? And you forget that your cloud services, you know, you use the cloud because it's supposed to be cheaper than, you know, physical servers. Otherwise, it's much better to fall back to physical servers. But again, we didn't go back to physical servers, but let's say that we spend much more than what we should be spending at one point in time. And going back to basic expenses, going back to understanding who are your customers, who are you serving them properly with, and how can you actually upsell and increase, you know, the revenue that you generate, ARPU, average return per user, from your users, and reduce your cost, is actually your margin, and that's an opportunity. And it was easy for us because we actually were able to list a lot of opportunities that was ignored, but it's generally probably the case for most of the people around here that have a working startup. You could actually figure out that you could do more with less. Generally, it worked for Twitter, it worked for us, different scale, but it worked. So I'm pretty sure it applies to everyone.
Thank you. So don't build a fat company. You've heard it. Let's talk about, just switch gears into more of your personal life. So how do you balance building this great business, doing the deal with OSN, going through the ups and downs? And what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs who are burning themselves out? How do you balance the two, your personal and your business?
Let's just say that I made all of the mistakes in the book, so is not exact. Balance isn't exactly what I'm known for. You should ask the table over there. I mean, I'm not exactly balanced in that point, but I'm full on what I like and what I care about. But I definitely recommend one thing. I mean, you hinted about it. Is like mental health is extremely important for a founder. With everything that we discussed, those ups and downs, the problems, the shit that goes wrong all over the place, and all of the mistakes that you pile up onto you. Dedicating, I used to wake up every day and read, because reading is what allows me to learn from others. I read a lot of books, I read a lot of biographies. I'm very much interested to figure out how those people, got successful or make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. The best thing would be to be in an open environment like this on a weekly, regular basis to actually discuss and understand. For me, it's like books, because that's what I figured made sense for me. And I started reading books for many years. This year I realized that, okay, fine, I know a lot of lessons. Probably I could still learn a lot, and I still have a lot of books that I'm supposed to read, but I need to do more for myself, for mental wellness. And that actually translated into me making a couple of hours working out every single day in the morning, 6 days a week. And I realized that this actually created mental clarity for me. So at the end of the day, you'll figure out your own way, whether it's around figuring out the time to read and learn on your own, or figuring out to work out on your own, anything. But I think at one point in time, I used to put, instead of those hours, put more work time. And I used to sleep at 3 a.m. and wake up very early, and I've went through all of that. But generally speaking, I think if you don't take care of yourself, and take care of your mind and body, your company will fail far easier than the inverse, because you have to be aware of everything that's happening, and overworking yourself will not help it.
What's your favorite book?
Right now, I mean, I go through phases. I mean, I don't want to go one favorite book. There's a lot of books that I love.
What would you recommend to this community?
The Hard Thing About Hard Thing is a book that I love a lot.
The what, sorry?
The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Okay.
Okay, it's a book by the Horowitz. Okay, and I think it's adaptable to this group. Another book that I like adapted for this group is called oh my god, Scott Belsky. Scott Belsky, the middle. I'll get you the messy middle. The messy middle,
Okay.
Scott Belsky. But a book that I love a lot.
Yeah.
I recently fell in love with, and I bought I think 34 copies of, and I distributed to the team 34 copies. It's a book called Amp It Up by Frank Slootman, the founder of, not the founder, sorry, the CEO of Snowflake and ServiceNow, and the previous company I forgot that he was CEO of 3 public companies.
We should get these books in the WhatsApp M5 community recommended by ELIE. That'll be really cool. So ELIE, thank you. ELIE, at the profile that ANGHAMI has today, I'm sure there's no shortage of advice and wisdom from many. And unlike ANGHAMI, with many startups who are looking to get to that level, you know, it's very hard to get out of your head, right? Whether you're a solo founder or co-founders, where you just want an insight, we just want to brainstorm with someone else. So what would you recommend to startups who often need to get out of their head and get some advice from someone else? And I'm sure even at your level, how do you do it?
I generally think that people are afraid to ask questions, to reach out and ask questions. Probably sometimes maybe because they don't want to appear, you know, maybe dumb or not really into their business. They think that asking questions is a bad thing, or you shouldn't ask someone. I definitely think if I had the opportunity to be, when we launched ANGHAMI, to have a big community as this one, whereby I could ask questions and I could reach out to someone, and I would have used it. I don't know about, you know, personally I have very little ego. I think the idea of asking something is never dumb, and you learn, and I used to do that a lot when I traveled. You know, I could go to the US and walk to a Twitter open door and ask the engineers certain things, and they would literally tell you, this is how we scale this is how we're doing our cache, this is how we do A/B testing, and you could walk and literally ask anyone. However, over here, I feel people don't want to open up what they're doing. They're afraid sometimes because they have an idea they don't want to share, or they don't want to give out numbers, and, you know, they don't want to literally dig into their pains with someone else. But I think, you know, I was speaking before, maybe failure is a stigma in the Arab world, and people don't really want to open up, and at the same time they're not sure whether if they ask for a favor or for an advice from someone else, if the other person will actually literally be very transparent and say it how it is, and not, I mean, that whole idea, I think we really up for, you know, renewal on this one. We really need to understand that at the end of the day, we are not competing, right? We are part of an ecosystem. If we all share our learnings, if we all share just one learning per month, we have tons of learning to become better at. If I tell someone this is how we scaled, let's say, a payment, or this is how we went into an external country, or this is how we work with partners, this is some type of, you know, success factor we figure out, start looking at retention instead of looking at acquiring, whatever. I mean, these particular things add up, and there's a lot of lessons that I now take for granted that took us in certain cases, millions of dollars to learn, because we had no one to ask, and we couldn't figure out, some mistakes you make that you can't roll them back, especially with people. I personally made a lot of mistakes with people, with hiring, with firing, with not following up properly to get to a point whereby we have a problem with a team member that I couldn't know how to figure out, and it's generally pretty good if we all share these. It could be HR or marketing or anything. That's how we can all get better together, and at the end of the day, there's one particular thing that I always focus on, which is iteration. And instead of trying to do a lot of things at the same time, try to do one thing at a time. That is part of the lessons that keep on giving for us.
And with that in mind, so we're going to open this up for the next 10 minutes. I'm going to ask you one more question, Ellie. So audience, please prepare if you've got a question. Ask away. We have Ellie's mind for 10 minutes for your startup. So please feel free. Whilst the audience think about the questions. So let's end with what's next for you and Eddie for ANGHAMI.
I mean, clearly the SN Plus deal is a big deal. We're taking over a big product, a big user base, a big content library, a premium one, from HBO, Warner, Universal, all of that. And we're literally releasing new product with way better platform than what exists, because we rebuilt everything from scratch, and we did it in a record time. We rebuilt an entire platform in roughly 3 months and a half. So I have the best team in the world to do all of that, and that's a big challenge that it is that we're going into it. Can a team that built a music service take over a video streaming service? Can we link them somehow? Can we do good for both users of one platform, product one, product two? Can we allow cross-selling? Can we create more for the same audience? Can we create more revenue from the same users? Can we use everything we learned on advertising on ANGHAMI to put it on SN Plus? Can we create local content? There's a lot of challenges going up, and I hope we're up for it. But it's we both love challenges, and that's a good one.
Congratulations, that sounds wonderful. More 3 a.m. nights, it sounds like?
Hopefully not, but probably for the next few weeks, yeah.
Well, good luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to open this up. There is a mic walking around, I think. Kareem, just behind you. So, to Kareem.
Thank you so much, ELIE. That was a wonderful talk. Thank you for your insights. I'm Kareem. I'm the guy climbing Burj Khalifa by stairs. Except I'm really climbing it from the outside, horizontally, not the inside. My question to you
I'll ask
is...
you in details later.
You can do it together.
So the question is, you talked about a growth loop earlier on, how you were expecting 300,000 customers in 1 year, and you got 1 million in 3 months. So that seems to be a very effective growth loop. I think this would be very beneficial for startups to know what you did right, what that growth loop was, and did you have to spend a lot on marketing for that, for example?
Yeah, so in terms of growth loops, we did many. We did a lot of growth loops. Spectacularly, probably 90% of them failed, right? I mean, it's fine. Some of them exactly succeeded a lot. A lot of those growth loops could be time looped. So something that we did many years ago that if you do today will work, right? You just need to figure out what is the current growth loop that works for your product. So part of the growth loop that we did at the time and that we succeeded with, and probably the biggest one at the time was two things. One I mentioned before, which is telco. Part of what we realized that people cannot pay by credit card, because one particular thing that we did at the time was understanding our user base and having a metric that we were tracking, what the percentage of users that can pay on our service. So simply not willing to pay, but can. Because generally a lot of startups say, okay, we're targeting a user base of 100 million users, we want just 1%, right? So it's not much 1%, so we end up with 1 million. But the question is, how many of those 100 million can pay, not will pay? right? And we realized that that percentage was very low. And by actually figuring out how we do with telcos, we suddenly increased that percentage by allowing anybody to pay without having a credit card. That worked as a pretty interesting growth loop for us. Why? Because we thought we were doing a payment method, but then we realized that that payment method became a growth loop because people could actually try it, could pay it very easily. It just, a click of a button on sending something by SMS, and then they pay us till ever. I mean, because it becomes recurrent. So that was something that we didn't exactly expect that it would work as it was. But the biggest one, and that one that probably got us the 1 million users at the time, was not something easy for anyone to achieve, but that was a deal that we did with NBC. I try to talk about stuff that everybody can achieve easily versus stuff that might have been, a time gap for us. So at the time, NBC wanted to have artists because they were launching The Voice and Arab Idol, stuff like that. They wanted to have music and they couldn't do it on their own. So we did a deal with them. They actually took equity for marketing for equity. And suddenly our platform that had, I don't remember exactly the number, but something like 30,000 users, and we were adding maybe 1,000, 2,000 a day. We launched with NBC, I think it's 30 December, something like that. And we started adding 10,000 per hour. Okay, we were adding a couple of thousand per day. We started adding 10,000 per hour, and all our servers went offline. We just couldn't take the traffic. So obviously that's not exactly a growth loop, that's a marketing deal that we did. But that taught us something very important. We can do, that is something that a lot of startups don't understand till today. The message over here was that we can't do everything on our own. Working with partners is essential, and that's what for us, working with partners is a distribution engine, right? So you can think about it any way that you want, but just take an example. Let's say if you want, I don't know whether you know over here in UAE there are cards Fazaha and Is'ad and stuff like that.
Of course.
Yeah. So just example, those are distribution loops. You could think it they're a discount system, but if you go with them and you create something with them, suddenly you're discovered by all the people that are actually prone to using discounts on this. So working with partnerships is what we learned, that it allows us to really distribute our product. It was very important for us at the days because we didn't have a marketing budget. We grew by viral. We wanted people to tell other people. And at the time we realized that once an artist tweeted about a song available on ANGHAMI, which is now obvious, but at the time wasn't, the concept of influencers wasn't obvious, we realized that that artist brought us much more than anybody else. We didn't realize that we were dealing with an influencer at the time, or it was called an influencer. But later we realized that this actually, when we created something and we gave it to the artist, it allowed us to get an influencer deal without paying anybody, without even understanding that it was an influencer deal. It sounds kind of very obvious today, but at the time for us, it was something that made perfect sense for us, and we grew on top of many of these. Some of them are obvious for a music service right now, but trust me, we had to create everything at the beginning.
That's amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Over to PK just in the left.
You know a lot about ANGHAMI. I'm interested to understand the question now.
So ELIE and ELIE, a lot of people don't realize what you guys achieved. You achieved the first million customers. I think you were probably one of the first early apps which had those kind of users. You come from a very fragmented area. You started in Lebanon, came to Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Saudi, all this stuff, and all these, I don't know how many incorporations you have. How many companies do you really have under the group in different parts of the
I think 7.
7 already? You're also, remember it's a fragmented market in the sense that, getting customers in the UAE does not mean you get customers in Saudi or Qatar or Bahrain or whatever, and they go around. And you also come from an area, music, for example, is the most fragmented rights business in the world, to do that. So you ended up creating something which is pretty unique, and I'm sure customers here, startups here, a lot of founders here are going through those problems, especially which are looking at a B2C market. So what's your advice for them? Like this, I don't think this fragmentation will stop soon, or we can't hope for it to become a consolidated market. People consider like Arabia to be a 300-400 million people market, but is it really? And what is the advice for these people to actually win that?
Yeah, exactly. At the beginning, we thought we were dealing with the Arab world. It's great questions, thank you. We thought we were dealing with the Arab world. We thought it's like that's a combined audience. I said 400 or whatever millions. And then, we definitely, we realized that everything in our market became fragmented. One, the markets are very different. People like to put in GCC all at one, Levant, let's say, at one, and North Africa. It doesn't work that way. You have different purchasing powers in different countries, and you have to link them together. So we created multiple areas across the Middle East to actually differentiate all of that. But your customers are fragmented, as rightly said. Your payment methods are very fragmented. I don't remember how many payment methods we have. We have 46 telcos and I think 11 other payment methods, or 10, 11 other payment methods. So just to realize it's super fragmented for us on the payment side. And on top of it, for music, I don't know if anybody can tell me how many labels we have, but in terms of sub-labels, I think we have over 50 or 60,000. Right? So we had, in terms of fragmentation, nothing goes in as in fragmentation across everything. One particular thing that was helpful is, when we launched, we just tracked everybody. We tried to understand their every user base on every country, how it actually can create segments within that country. And those segments would eventually track to something that would be identifiable. I'm trying to simplify over here. We realized, for instance, that we have an audience that say, it doesn't matter that if that user is in the UAE or Saudi or wherever, that user has always the latest iPhone. Right? Some users have, always are using Android on Wi-Fi. Some users have you start to segment by something that would actually allow you to correlate all of the users together. For us, it was very clear that people on iPhone that are using always on cellular were like the A category. Those are a segment that we can target. They would be easy to convert, right? You could put them, twice a convention message or whatever, they would convert easier. And people who are on Android on Wi-Fi would be the worst to convert. This is part of the thinking process. So when we used to do digital marketing, we still do that, but in terms of segmentation, we realized earlier on, if you actually target the higher end Android and the higher end iPhone, they're equal. The conversion would be equal. But if you target Android and iPhone, the conversion of iPhone would be 3-4 times as better than Android, simply because you're mixing and matching totally different user bases. By that, we started to literally understand that without segmentation, we're dealing with totally different individuals, and in the same country, you would actually create buckets. So there is a bucket in Egypt, for instance, one of the biggest emerging markets in the region, the biggest audience in the region. There is a bucket that actually would pay more than Saudis. Right? There is a bucket that you can target in Egypt that would pay more than Saudis. So it's not like Egypt is a low-end market and Saudi is a higher-end market, because you will find in Saudi a lower-end market and in Egypt a higher-end market. So that segmentation across the Middle East became for us part of doing business. And part of doing business is understanding whether you put an ad, for instance, a digital marketing ad, and you put the price on it or you don't put the price on it. Depending on the segmentation, you figure out that there's an audience that would be price sensitive, that needs the price. Otherwise, why do I want to get them to click on an ad and acquire the bad audience? Because it's easy to trick your users to click on ads, but those ads cost money. So if your funnel in your funnel you're acquiring the bad audience, that means you're throwing such a big net. You're going to acquire everybody who's going to come in into your product. You're paying that customer acquisition cost. They will look, this costs money, I don't want it, I'm going to go. So it's much better to actually target the right audience and get the right people who would actually convert once you're actually focusing on revenue. If you're not focusing on revenue, then fine, but at least you want the users to actually hit something. So you want to target an audience that would be willing, let's say, to play music in our case. If they don't play music and are not willing to convert, why do they want them, right? I mean, I would have paid for an audience that would immediately churn and wouldn't work, right? So all of that seems, in my mind, they're easy because we've done it so many times. But for many startups, for many actually, trust me, established companies, they keep on, those mistakes are part of the business, and a lot of the time they don't see them because they don't segment. Because if you have a big budget and you're acquiring a lot of users, if you don't segment that, you're going to fail. You're not going to understand that you're actually overspending on some audience and underspending on another audience. Segmenting makes things much better and gets everybody accountable.
Wow. Sounds like you've really refined your marketing strategy.
I mean, it's an ongoing process, but yeah, you learn.
We have one more question just over there. So this will be,
Hi.
I think, our last question.
My name is Rose Hindi. I'm an executive coach, and I have my boutique firm for coaching and training. I want you to know, Elie and Eddie and the team, that you guys are so inspiring. And luckily, this inspiration happens very often. Why? Because I have ANGHAMI playing in my car, I have it at the gym, I have it at home. So very often I'm reminded that things are possible when it's really so hard. Entrepreneurial life is dreadful. And I wanted to share with me and with everyone a dreadful moment of yours, very scary, where you almost decided to quit, but you haven't. When was it, and what are the learnings?
I have a long list to choose from, right?
The scariest.
First, it's good to actually admit that you go through ups and downs. I never walked away. I mean, we were still running the show and we're very happy with what we do. But honestly, I like to look at the recent history, not the old one. Probably one of the old history that really affected me is when an important employee, basic stuff, but for a founder, when you built your company on people, when an employee tells you, I'm going to walk, I'm leaving, because, simply got a good offer in a foreign company and is just traveling, that really affects you. That's really affects you. It doesn't affect you as in you want to walk away, but that affects you in a deep moment, because you realize how important people are for your company. And I really want to say that because I think some might not realize how important all members are from a team to build whatever company we have. And for us at ANGHAMI, it's all around the people.
Did you retain him?
Sorry?
Were you able to retain him? Or?
Not sometimes. It's we retained some, a lot we couldn't retain, but it's fine. Many of the people that left ANGHAMI stayed for us maybe 5, 6, 7 years, and that is by far way better than any attrition rate of most companies. I'm very proud when I look at people who are with us for 8, 9, 10 years, and I think very few companies are able to retain that much. So you lose some, you gain some, it's fine. But in terms of the critical moments that, when I'll be very transparent, when the stock market crashed and, we lost a lot of value, that really affected me a lot. Not because, I had my, something liquid and I wanted to buy a Ferrari or anything, not at all. But the whole point is that when you are a public, you literally are public. So basically, it's as if you're valued by a number. So everybody started asking me about that number and what happened and whatever. for us, it's never about that number. That number for us didn't make us. We're not connected to a number that makes our value or our, our gratification or our, love of ourselves or our company. But that became a proxy for a certain point in time, and it really affected us. And we felt that we were a failure simply because the stock market crashed. But that's obviously didn't exactly impact us long term. Let's say a few weeks were hard. But generally speaking, that's for us, we realize that there is value that we can create, and there is still a lot of things that we can do. And at the end of the day, we're going to be just fine. Just put our head down, work hard, and we'll create value again. But during that particular moment, it was dark, clearly. And thank you for being a fan of ANGHAMI. Thank you.
A paying customer. Not, you didn't hack ANGHAMI like back in the... You actually paid. Okay, good. So, ELIE, thank you so much. I'm aware that we're sitting in between the food. So I just want to thank you for the honesty, transparency. You get a real sense of what it would be to work for you and work with you just from this conversation. I'm sure there's startups here who've learned a lot from the conversation. So please join me in thanking ELIE for coming over to
Thank you, everyone.
So yeah, thanks again.
And if anyone want to ask me anything aside, feel free. Take care and enjoy the support.
Yeah, thank you. So the signal is just over there, so please feel free. Thank you.